The Retirement Cafe podcast. Meet Pete Matthew, the ultimate personal finance guru. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hello and welcome. I'm so pleased you could join me for this week's episode. For the whole of June, the podcast is brought to you by the Joy Club. If you're looking for a more joyful retirement, the Joy Club is for you. The Joy Club is a membership website that enables members to enjoy a more active, connected, and joyful retirement. There's something new for members to enjoy every weekday with their exclusive online member events. Members get access to art classes, mindful and relaxing Tai Chi and Qigong sessions, a monthly book club, expert talks from healthcare professionals, filmmakers, historians, plus regular Zumba, ballroom and yoga classes. As a member, you can activate great discounts on food and drink, eco-friendly products, family days out, tours, and much more. You can discover money-making opportunities and volunteering. Access the community via the Joy Clubbers Facebook group and enjoy inspiring content delivered weekly into your inbox. Join today for free or upgrade to premium membership for just £5 a month and unlock unlimited access to the Joy Club's online member events. Listeners to this podcast can enjoy 3 months of premium membership absolutely free by using the promo code RETIRECAFE21. You don't need to enter your credit card details, there's no obligation to upgrade, and you can cancel anytime. Simply go to www.thejoyclub.com, click sign up and enter the promo code when prompted. This offer is redeemable until the 31st of August 2021. To find out more about the Joy Club, take a listen to episode 123 with the Joy Club's founder, Hannah Thompson, which was released just 2 weeks ago. Now, on to this week's guest. If you are a fan of money-related podcasts or video blogs, you will most probably know my guest already. It's none other than Pete Matthew. In 2010, Pete set out to provide simple and accessible financial planning information to the masses. He created and is host of the award-winning podcast, Meaningful Money, a podcast dedicated to helping anyone get their finances in order. A decade later, and Pete's podcast has had over 4.5 million downloads. Pete's gone on to build an online academy, the Meaningful Academy. It teaches you everything about money, from simple budgeting to investing for the long term. Pete's both a certified and chartered financial planner and is managing director of Jackson's Wealth Management based in Penzance in Cornwall. In our conversation, Pete and I discussed the story behind the incredibly successful podcast, why he believes that everyone is capable of investing but are scared to do so, and the advice he has recently shared in his retirement planning series. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Pete as much as I did. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe podcast, Pete Matthew.
Justin, great to be here, my friend. Thank you so much for having me.
No, I'm really looking forward to our chat. And I was thinking back, Pete, it's a little while ago now, but the last time I actually saw you in flesh and shook your hand was probably a couple of years back now at a conference. It was I'm trying to remember what the well-being conference, I think, financial well-being.
Yeah,
do you remember that?
Bristol is it the sort of air museum or something with Concorde in it?
Yeah, that's right. And a little wander through a Concorde, which I remember quite fabulous, and remember staring up as a youngster out of my garden, seeing this thing going over. I live fairly close to Birmingham Airport, and I remember seeing it. Anyway. Pete, Now, I know you well, and you're in the same profession as me, of course, but some of our listeners may not know you, the legend Pete Matthews. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
You're very kind. I always worry when people call me a legend. It feels like a lot to live up to, really. Well, look, mate, I'm a very ordinary guy. My name is Pete Matthew. I'm married to Jo. Got two daughters, 18 and 21. I am a financial advisor, just like you, financial planner, Justin, and I am managing director of a practice down here in Penzance in West Cornwall called Jackson's Wealth Management. Followed a fairly sort of classic advisor career path, really. Hated my degree, didn't want to do it anymore, and I'd met Jo by then and wanted to get married, so I sort of skipped my second year exams and went to work for McDonalds instead, where I'd been sort of flipping burgers as a student. That was fine, but not really.
I can't imagine what the conversation with your mum and dad was at that point.
No, yeah, not pleasant. They've forgiven me since. But Mackie D's wasn't really conducive to a harmonious newly married life with a wife who's a nurse doing something meaningful. And our shifts kept clashing, so I had to get another job, and I had a friend who was in the industry, in the financial services world, for the Co-op Insurance. So I joined them for a couple of years, then Royal and Sun Alliance, and then I made the leap to the independent world, moved down here, and eventually 2005 joined Jackson's Wealth Management, and mortgaged to the hilt to buy into the company in 2007, which was the best move I ever made, really. And I now glory in the title of Manager Director, and we have a lot of fun serving our clients, and we're really busy, and it's cool. It's a nice place to live and work.
Fantastic. And of course, I would only have the good advisors on the show, and of course I know you're one of the good guys, but of course, just linking in that your wife obviously does meaningful work there with nursing, and of course you had to do something meaningful yourself.
Yeah, so that story was extremely normal, until sort of 10, 11 years ago when I started messing around on the beach with video cameras. And that became a project called Meaningful Money, which is, I guess, why we're having this conversation, huh?
Absolutely. So what's behind Meaningful Money? And this is for those who don't know, this is a YouTube sensation in the personal finance space.
Very kind. So yeah, this is back in 2009. I just had two or three things come together, really, that sort of like the universe trying to tell me something. So I kind of wanted to make a bit more of a dent in the universe than just helping my clients. I love helping my clients for sure, but I just kind of wanted to do more. Not sure why. It was just something that I felt I wanted to do. Second thing was that in a bunch of different spheres of my life, people told me that I was good at explaining things, and that kind of sunk in. So whether that was around the dining table with my then young children, or whether it was on the board of governors at my local school, or at church doing sort of lay preaching or whatever, just people said, you explained that really well, you communicate really well, and that kind of sunk in. Right, my dad was a teacher, so maybe it's genetic. And then the third thing really was I read a book called Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk, which essentially the message of that book is, look, whatever you are passionate about, whatever your message is, thanks to the free or very cheap platforms now, you can get that message out, and there are no gatekeepers. There's no editors, there's no production people telling you you're not pretty enough or your voice isn't right or anything like that. You can just literally turn on a camera and start talking to it and get your message out there. And so I thought I'd have a go, and so I did. I bought a video camera, which you can't see actually, it's just off frame, but it's on my shelf up here as a kind of memento, a little flip video camera about the size of a packet of fags, and I set it up very early in the morning on the prom down in Penzance, and started talking to it, and I just said, look, I'm going to explain how money works, because we don't teach this stuff in school, so I just wanted to sort of fill something of a knowledge gap. And 500 odd videos later, and then also I switched to podcasting in 2012. Over 400 episodes of the podcast, nearly 5 million downloads. It's become a bit of a monster, really, that's somewhat taken over my life. So I'm very grateful because, I have an absolute blast doing it. I love kit and technology and software and stuff, so it really appeals to me. So a hobby has become something very different, and it now just leads a shed load of business to Jackson's, my practice. So it's all, I feel very blessed actually that I get to do what I do.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what a story. What a fantastic story. And of course, you've covered everything, haven't you? I mean, you right across the gambit. I mean, so how did you say 500 episodes on the YouTube channel?
Yeah, there's more than I believe it's around about 500 videos. Some of them are terrible, man. The early ones, please don't anybody watch those. The latter ones are a little bit better produced, and it's about, I think I'm on about episode of the podcast about 417 now, so that's been weekly since the spring of 2013. I did a few episodes before that, but pretty much weekly, and I haven't missed many weeks in that time, and yeah, it's become a bit of a beast.
And some people might think, how on earth do you find enough to talk about for 500 episodes? Where did you start, and where are you at now?
I get asked that all the time because you think, well, there's only so much you can talk about, right? And it's the first thing I did, actually, I was sitting in a really boring seminar on charity financial planning. So it's back in 2009. And I think it's in the Crush It book. Gary Vaynerchuk says, look, you need to, if you can't sit down and write at least 50 subject lines for like a blog post or a podcast or a YouTube video, so the 50 headlines or subjects, then you don't know what you're talking about. So in that seminar, I kind of tuned out and opened my notebook and started writing basically from scratch what I could talk about in roughly bite-sized pieces. Quickly got to 75 episodes. It's just like spend less than you earn, how to budget, how to clear debt, and all that sort of stuff. Breaking it down, and of course, then once you sort of get to the end of that, and you've talked about pretty complex pension planning or estate planning or whatever, there's always a different angle. And as well as I do, Justin, we get asked questions by our clients every day. I've just got pretty good at making a note of those questions and then occasionally then saying, okay, I will address those questions. And these days on the podcast, I work in a seasons format, so I tend to do 10 or a dozen episodes on roughly a sort of linked subject. So I did a pensions masterclass season. I'm in the middle of a checklist season in the minute, so actually every episode is standalone, but it's a kind of a checklist that you can work through for your annual financial review or how to set up an investment or all that sort of stuff. So, there's only so much you can talk about, but there's always different ways to spin it and different ways to approach it. And so I don't anticipate running out of stuff to talk about anytime soon, which I'm sure you agree with.
And of course, I do, absolutely. And I think there's so many angles here, aren't there? Because the first of all, your passion at the beginning of going, we're not teaching this stuff at school, so let's give people the information. Now, of course, there is the aspect is actually the information is all out there now. I mean, you and I know, we've done all the exams, we're chartered, we're certified financial planners, we've got all these tickets after our names. But just because we've got a lot of knowledge doesn't mean that we've got people queuing at the door. Because you've got to have, you've actually, in all the knowledge on, you can Google pretty much anything. I mean, in fact, I asked Alexa the other week what the ISA allowance was, and she told me, so therefore the information is there. But I always give this analogy of, occasionally I have been known to have a glass of wine, and I'm no expert, right? I am so no expert at choosing wine. And there's people in my family who really know what they're doing, and I have no idea. But I do know I've had a couple of glasses in my time, which I like, and I know that in the wine aisle at Sainsbury's, I kind of know where it is. I know it's about £10, and I know that it's a fairly safe bet, to be honest, because I kind of know that. But then I look at the rest of the range, and I'm just kind of going, I'm overawed, really. That's the problem. I just kind of there must be something here I like as well. But there's so much there, I actually kind of implode and just buy what I've always bought. And this is the thing, isn't it? That Google can give you all the information you need if you know what you're looking for. The problem is, most of us don't know what we're looking for.
That's true. If there's one line that people who eventually sort of give up trying to DIY and then get in touch with me to work with them one-on-one, if there's one line that they say to me all the time, it's like, we don't know what we don't know, so we need a professional eye on our plans. I actually passionately believe that most people, everybody really, if they set their mind to it, can do their own financial planning and can navigate the system. But obviously you and I have got God knows how many decades of experience between us, and it takes time to build that up. And when you're an expert in something, obviously you can sometimes see what needs to be done more quickly. And so you and I will always have a job, because there will always be people who say, you know what, I would rather pay to have this done right than try and sort of fiddle my way through. My goal with Meaningful Money is to equip people to do as much as they can themselves. And I think particularly in what you and I would probably call the accumulation phase, so the saving, pre-retirement, if you want to call it that, really that's quite easy. Most people just need a pension and a stocks and shares ISA. They need to know what to sort of invest in inside that, and they just need to let it be and save as much as they can, right? And that's largely it for most of us. Of course, there's always outliers. There's always people with complex pensions from decades ago, or company schemes and things like that. So those are the people obviously can benefit from professional financial planning. But for most people, it's actually pretty easy. And my goal is to equip people with the knowledge that they don't get at school or at college or at university. If you're lucky to have a parent that's good at this stuff and they pass it on to you, then that's great. But most of us don't. I certainly didn't. And so I just wanted to sort of fill that gap, really. And some would say, I know early on, advisors that I would talk to would say to me, you're sort of giving away the milkshake, right? It's like, well, you're giving away the knowledge. Nobody's going to come to you for advice. You're kind of giving it all away for free. It's like, that's not how the internet works, for a start, actually. And I mean, we've never been busier. I have a waiting list of clients to work with me. So funny that they were wrong and I was right. And I think just by being relentlessly helpful online, in my case, that has really worked very well, and the universe has looked after me as a result. So it's a bit of a win-win from my point of view.
Yeah. I mean, again, coming back to my wine analogy, someone could be, sending me all the information in the world about different grapes and harvests and good years and bad years and all the rest of it. But actually, if someone could actually just walk down the aisle with me, yeah, sure. And go, do you know what? I've had a look in your basket and I can see that you're having this tonight for your food, etc. This would go really well, and you go, right, okay, thanks very much. I could have read all the books in the world, but that still wouldn't have given me that guidance.
Yeah, and interestingly, what I tend to very often find is that I get people who contact me and they say, look, I have read like 24 books on how to invest. I feel like I understand the macroeconomic situation pretty well, and yet I haven't invested a dime because I cannot bring myself to push the button and actually put real hard-earned money on the basis of my own research. I need somebody to tell me what to do. It's really interesting. So, I get to work with some incredibly intelligent, very, very capable people, but this is something, they understand what I'm doing and why I'm recommending it, but they just want somebody else to press the button. So, there's it's a pretty broad church of people out there, and, I want to serve people in that whole spectrum, from those who want bespoke one-on-one financial planning to those who just want to find out a bit more about how it all works, and it's keeping me busy.
And for the people who people do find out how it works and get on and do it themselves, then that's fantastic. But of course, we all know that. Well, I'm a mad advocate of getting coached. So I give another story. When I was about 20, my managing director Martin, the insurance brokers I started off with, was a keen windsurfer, and he would take me windsurfing, and I bought some secondhand kit off him, and I taught myself to, in Birmingham Reservoir, which is not the prettiest of places, to windsurf, and it took me 6 months of very, very sore knees and falling off and getting back on and falling off and getting back on in freezing cold conditions. And eventually I kind of, managed to progress to the, actually after a couple of years, to the ability to, I passed my level 1 instructor's ticket so I could teach people to windsurf. And, after when I followed all the procedures there, very straightforward, laid out kind of set way of teaching, the Royal Yachting Association had kind of this way of, taking people through a program. People would learn to windsurf in a weekend. And I was like, first of all, I was chuffed to bits because I taught them to windsurf in a weekend. But I was like, it took me 6 months to learn that. I learned by absolutely pure kind of brute force and ignorance. and they learned, well, kind of relatively easily. And ever since then, I've kind of going, you know what? Every time I need to know something and I want to get there quickly, I am going to get someone to teach me how to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Going on with that, of course, one of the big things that you've got going on is an actual online course now, isn't it? That you are actually teaching people. They can buy a course from you and actually kind of get really stuck in. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this is I see this as kind of the middle tier. So my model, such as it is, I'd love to say that I planned this to the nth degree, but I generally just sort of model my way through. Most of it works. So essentially, there's three tiers to my offering. So there's the free tier, which is YouTube, the podcast, and I don't ever hold anything back there. It really is everything, put out there to help people as much as I can. But then the next tier up is meaningfulacademy.com. And that is, if you like, more focused. So if you want to make progress quickly, then that's where to go. It saves you searching for stuff. There's basically modules within that whole thing. There's 3 phases depending on what life stage you're at. So there's sort of foundations, which is getting out of debt, learning how to budget, basics of life insurance, all the stuff you need to do to build a really good foundation to build on. The middle section is build wealth. Which then is all about how to set up a decent investment portfolio, how to review it, how it all works, how the different asset classes work together. And then phase 3, which is still under construction, is retirement planning, which we should be launching back into June, hopefully. And that is very much around the transition into retirement, which is, that's the meat, right? That's really challenging. But as part of the second 2 tiers, there's also access to a financial planning app called Voyant, which is a big part of my offering here at Jackson's. I would use it with clients, but actually give them access to Voyant and teach them how to build their own plans, with lots of caveats, of course, that it's it's planning, so it's wrong by default, but at least it's helpful in sort of helping you think through some stuff. So that's been wildly successful. I had no idea that it would be, but it's again just sort of massively surprised me. And it's keeping me busy, so I've had to take on staff to help me run that now. And then the top tier is Jackson's Wealth down here in Penzance. So there's a steady stream of people who want one-on-one bespoke financial planning specific to their circumstances. And so it's good, man. The academy was just an idea I had, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years ago, something like that, and I've sort of built it up slowly since then, and it's going well.
Great. Well, all credit to you. All credit to you. Any way of people accessing, as we all know, the cost of running a financial services business, financial planning business is pretty high now, and therefore the fees are often out of reach of kind of normal people, I suppose, of average income in the UK. And I agree with you. If I come across a 35-year-old something who's trying to work out whether they should, pay off their mortgage or pay into a pension or do all those types of things, there's accumulating people. Their best investment would be, a couple of hours spent on your YouTube channel, rather than paying for a financial advisor. Actually, they can do this stuff themselves. I know I'll probably upset an awful lot of people by saying that, but that's what I believe. I think that...
Yeah, I believe that too. And part of the whole sort of genesis of Meaningful Money was, you remember, Justin, back into 2012, early to 2013, a set of legislation came about which basically abolished commission on pensions and investments. It was called the Retail Distribution Review, and unequivocally a good thing, no doubt about that. But any idiot could have seen, well, I say any idiot, but clearly nobody in government or in the regulator could have seen that if you remove that method of advisors being remunerated, it just disenfranchises a massive swathe of the population. So a young couple who used to walk into the bank, see an advisor there, get some life insurance. It might not have been the cheapest life insurance. It might not have been the best one, but it was at least some cover. That was a better outcome than one of them dying with a young child and the financial misery as well as all the rest of the stuff. So it led to what has become known as the advice gap, all right? The jury's out and there's lots of different thoughts as to whether that actually exists or not. But the fact is, you're dead right. Most people cannot get really good financial planning advice because we have to charge too much to jump through all the regulatory hoops. I know nobody's bleeding or crying for us, right? But we're very blessed. We're in a great industry, but it is hard. And I've tried various sort of initiatives and methods of charging here at Jackson's to try and help people who are getting started and give proper advice, and I just can't get it cheap enough in a way that helps people properly, and hence the academy. It's like, look, take this course, it'll cost you 300 quid, but that's better than 2 grand or whatever to pay an advisor for bespoke advice. But if you take this course and do what I tell you, it'll be fine. And then, of course, if nothing else, you're equipped then, if you do eventually see an advisor, to ask the right questions and all that sort of stuff. So it's just trying to meet a need, man. And I think the industry has been woefully self-serving and continues to be, because of the way it's regulated and because of the costs involved in doing that. When I say I wanted to make a dent in the universe right at the start, I sometimes phrase it another way, which was I didn't just want to help rich people get richer, right? And the whole idea of Meaningful Money is to be sort of fairly egalitarian and just say, look, let's get this information out there so people can help themselves. I get quite soapboxy about it, can you tell?
No, I agree. I mean, you know, I'm obviously operating, as you know, in the retirement space only, and I'm doing that particularly because I appreciate how complex it is. And you know, when you make a decision if I look back and make a decision, you know, when I was 24 about money, you know, as long as I realized, I'll give you another example there. In fact, a better example. I was chatting to I have another coach, someone in the gym who helps me train, and he's a relatively comparable to me, a youngster. You know, he's 28, and pretty good athlete, etc. But he was telling me a story. He'd been in America and he'd been working as a professional tennis coach out there, on the circuit, doing really well, and then kind of got to the end of his gig, I suppose, and just went, I don't want to do this any longer. And he had to take because he'd been earning a lot of money, he bought himself a nice car and a nice apartment. And then of course, he suddenly wanted to quit. So he wanted to come back to the UK. And he took his car he'd been paying for it on a monthly basis, took it back to the car garage, and they say, well, by the way, you need to give us another $8,000 and we'll take the car and then you're clear. And he was like, wow, that really wasn't a smart decision, was it, that car? That's really caught me out. So he's paid the check. And I just said, but I said to him, he was telling me the story, you know, and he wasn't selling it in a bad way. He's just saying, you know, maybe I should have had my eyes wide open. I said, yeah, but you've probably learned the biggest lesson that you're ever going to learn. And you're going to make, and you've also got a chance to recover. You've got a chance for real careful decisions going forward. Whereas our retirees, when they come to me with their 20 years worth of stuff and they're going, you know, we're finishing work in 3 years time, it's game over, we're not going to be able to have any more income coming in, or we don't want to because we don't want to sell our time any longer. We've really got to get this decision right.
Yeah, absolutely right, man. I always say, if there is one point in your financial life where everybody should take the time and pay the money to see a professional financial planner, it's in the run up to retirement, so that you can get those decisions right. Because again, I mean, you'll remember 2006. You remember something called pension simplification? That was a laugh, right? More complicated than it's ever been still to this day. And that's just pensions. Of course, that's just one part of the retirement picture. And for any lay person to hold together the different threads of pensions, other investments, the tax system, final salary or DB schemes, all that sort of stuff, understanding the impact of inflation in retirement, which is a massive deal and sort of woefully underplayed, I think. Understanding and holding together all those threads is difficult, right? And that's what you and I also spend most of my time helping people in the at retirement or in retirement space, because it's the most complex point in anybody's financial life, and that's why you and I have a job, for sure. It's really important to seek advice at that point, I think.
It is, and coming to that you on your podcast, Series 17 was all about retirement planning. Tell me more about the kind of, the aspects that possibly people could come and listen to there to become more informed.
Yeah, I've slept since then, man. So season 17. So it's, retirement, that as a word, I think, can be laden with all kinds of negative connotations. I know you're doing a great job of putting positive connotations to that, and it is, and that is the traditional word. The Americans like to call it FI, financial independence, but I still spend most of my time calling it retirement because that's what it is. But it isn't just about the money. You and I both believe very passionately that money is only ever a means to an end. Pursuing wealth for its own sake is really a pathway to a pretty meaningless life. Money is about enabling us to pursue the things that we really care about. It gives us the freedom to do that. So money is an enabler, but can be a disabler if we get it wrong. And so, when you're approaching retirement, it's about sort of firstly understanding where you're at. So what do you have? What have you amassed? So many people come to me just now, I don't know if it's the same for you. They're only sort of 5 years away from retirement maybe, and they're only now starting to think, do you know what, I better start taking this seriously. I'm not actually sure what I've got. I know I had a pension 25 years ago with that company, but I've done nothing with it since. And so first thing is to sort of get everything together, know where you're at, financially speaking. And then you need to sort of project a little bit, like what does retirement look like, or what would I like it to look like? And ultimately, what is that going to cost? If you can distill financial planning down to its simplest point, it's really money in and money out. And if there is more going out than is coming in, you are going to burn through capital. And then we need to establish what that burn rate is. Are you going to run out of money or not? Last thing any of us wants is to sort of get to our 80s and suddenly realize we're on state pension only because we've spent everything else. So get on top of everything, start to plan a little bit and dream a little bit. Part of my job, your job, is to help people articulate their goals and their desires. We'd love to, maybe have a place up near our kids so we can see the grandchildren, or at the very least have a very nice car that we can go up there in comfort, or whatever. Articulate that stuff. And then it's about positioning the pieces, really. So making sure that everything is in the right place so that you can use your money as tax and as cost efficiently as possible all the way into retirement, and be flexible and nimble, because life has a sneaky way of sort of chucking things at you that you weren't expecting. You make a plan and then 6 months down the line it's completely messed up because something happens. A daughter gets divorced and suddenly you've got to help them back onto the property ladder, or God forbid there's some illness or an earlier than hoped for death. Life chucks these things at us, and so we need to be nimble and keep our money flexible so that we can dance around those things effectively. The last thing anybody needs is for money to be an additional negative factor. We all have enough stuff to deal with as it is, with family and relationships and health and all that sort of stuff. Money doesn't need to be one of them. And that's why we have a job, and that's why I talk to this camera every week about this stuff, and so do you.
Pete, just kind of as a conversation that I know we would have if we did, manage to catch up at a conference. But, my current thought process is that we, obviously talking about things that we weren't expecting. We've had a pandemic. We're in the middle of a pandemic that's still all going on. And this has got to be repaid. Therefore, if I was being a little bit smart and I borrowed a load of money, I would quite like a little bit of inflation to repay some of that debt for me. If I had borrowed £100 and I said, Pete, I'll pay you back over the next 20 years, so I'll give you 100 quid in 20 years time. And I know I can secure that at an interest rate of about, 0.25%. First of all, I think that's pretty darn attractive. Yeah. And second of all, I kind of go, well, if inflation's, I don't know, 3 or 4 or possibly 5%. Now, the average UK inflation since 1945, because I'm a bit of a geek, is 5.7%. I mean, that's the old RPI figure, not the new CPI figure, which, is a whole different conversation as well. But inflation is around about 5, has historically been around about 5%. That means that £100 debt, if inflation was 5%, is being reduced by a fiver a year. Yeah. In very broad strokes. Yeah. So at the end of 20 years, when I give you your £100 back, yeah, your 100 quid is basically worthless. Yeah. Now, not wanting to be a world economist, but that would be a pretty fortunate position for someone who'd borrowed a load of money, wouldn't it? Now, therefore, have our retirees who've got a possibly a non-inflated income in the stroke of, they may have big building society deposits, which are only getting peanuts on 0.5%, 0.25%, 1% if you're lucky. And then they may have a state pension, which at the moment is index linked, but we don't know how long that will continue for because it's another government debt. They may have some defined benefit pensions which have got a cap on their inflation rate of return of how much they will go up. But we do know the cost of living with inflation goes up. So, my Sainsbury's shopping bill will continually to rise, and my gas and my electric and all that other stuff will continually going up. But my deposits will continually go down in value because of this inflation. Now, and because it's all a bit secret, no one's actually going and taking money off me with inflation, but it's just oozing away. I wonder whether governments might let inflation rise significantly. What do you reckon?
I mean, it would certainly serve them to do that, wouldn't it? It's always a fine balance to strike, and you never really know what's going on in the machinations underneath the bonnet. Bank of England's independent. Yeah, it's like, is it really? You're telling me there's not conversations going on behind the sort of closed doors of the Treasury?
We know conversations seem to be going on all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
That are supposed to be going on, don't we?
By text.
I don't know when this is going out, but that is a reference, to Mr. Cameron, and So therefore. I just think for retirees, again, this is just an additional challenge, isn't it? That
it really is.
Because they like to hold cash. They like, classically, the little old lady who with a significant few £100,000 or £100,000 sat in the local building society because it's nice and safe. It ain't as safe as they think it is.
It really is a silent killer. And the thing about inflation is that we largely ignore it until we retire. Because generally speaking, and it is of course a generalisation, generally speaking our earnings rise slightly ahead of inflation. It's a massive generalisation. Don't tell anybody in the public sector that, right? No. Yeah, exactly.
Don't tell the nurses and but yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We appreciate you, and we're sorry. But yes, it's generally speaking, wages sort of keep pace or maybe slightly exceed inflation, but generally we don't really feel it. And even inflation itself is, of course, it's an artificial construct. When we put numbers on it, it's a basket of goods that's changing periodically. But where it really hurts, and I think a greater proportion of retirees' spending is on sort of super inflationary stuff, food and fuel, primarily holidays, right? As opposed to maybe stuff which generally goes down in value, like computers and technology and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot of maths behind it. I'm not an economist either. That stuff bores me out of my skull, really. But you're dead right. And we really have to wake up about inflation. It is the silent killer, and it can really sneak up on you. When I am doing planning for clients, I know you do the same, Justin, we show charts on a screen. It's basically a cash flow chart, what's going out and what's coming in throughout life. And there's a little button on this software which puts things in real money, which sort of flattens it. It applies inflation, but I never or very rarely switch that button on because I like people to see that it's going up. And it's like, okay, well, if you're telling me you're spending $40,000 a year now, you realize by the time you're 85, that's 90 grand a year. And they go, what? 90,000 a year? So yeah, okay. So that sort of £500,000 you're keeping in the bank, you're going to burn through that pretty quick, right? At 90 grand a year. And so we have to push our money. We have to work it harder than we might think. And we're kind of, I suppose it's historic when people used to have pension funds and they used to buy annuities. That was a cash event, right? You converted your pension fund for a guaranteed income for life. Not so many people do that now, but we still sometimes I still have conversations with people saying, right, I need to sort of reduce the risk of my pension pot as I hit retirement. I said, that is by no means a given. You need to understand risk and you need to understand diversification, but we need to push this money hard. As ever, the regulator doesn't really understand what risk means in real terms. It's a sort of tick box, and they want us to talk about capacity for loss and things like that. But really, we need to be talking about, well, what is your capacity for running out of money, Mr. and Mrs. Client? What's it going to be like if your deposits are worthless when you're 85 and you want to get some help around the house or whatever, or you want care? These are really important issues, man, and it's our job to really lay it on thick. We need to almost slap people about the face a bit with our words and say, look, we must understand this. It's serious. It's potentially a life-threatening thing down the line. It just doesn't feel like it when you're 62 and you're thinking about retiring and you think you've got everything you need. It needs to be planned for.
Yeah, wise words. Well, thank you so much for today's conversation, Pete. I've got a feeling we could probably kind of run this on for hours. And I've got so many topics I'd love to chat with you about. Maybe I'll just have to hook in and listen to you more often. Where can people find out more about the great work you're doing?
Bless you, that's very kind, Justin. It's been great to chat with you, mate, as ever, always is. I miss you. I miss this sort of in-person stuff. We need to do that again soon, let's hope. So the best place to find out what I'm up to is at meaningfulmoney.tv. Don't ask why it's .tv, it's just what I decided to go with back in 2009. I haven't got the .com. Meaningfulmoney.tv, pretty much everything is there, and links to Jackson's and all that sort of stuff. But there's a ton of information on there. There's I have a book, and it's all linked on that site. So meaningfulmoney.tv, everything is there.
Well, we'll put the notes in the show notes and how people can contact you if they want. And well, once again, Pete, I really appreciate your time, and I desperately look forward to seeing with you and maybe having a pint.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me, bud. Cheers.
Thanks once again to Pete Matthew for joining me today. To find out more about the Meaningful Money podcast and the Meaningful Academy, check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you will find those useful links. I know that some of our listeners prefer to watch my conversation, so you will find a video version of every episode on my YouTube channel, Justin King MFB. Thank you once again to the Joy Club for sponsoring this podcast. To find out more about how the Joy Club can help you enjoy a more active, connected and joyful retirement, check out the show notes where you'll find details of the exclusive offer for you. Listeners to the Retirement Cafe podcast for 3 months free premium membership to the Joy Club. As ever, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it really helps more people like you find us. So until next time, this is Justin King helping you feel more informed in your retirement.